Hey everyone, how's everyone doing? Today's episode is going to be a behind the scenes, and we're going to be having Marcin on. So I'm so excited to have him on. And while we wait for him to come on, I wanted to just let you guys know about my networking event. The last Thursday of every month, we have our networking event. And this month, it's going to be on private lending. So if you want to lend money, come to this networking event because you'll get to learn all about how private lending works. If you're looking to borrow money, same thing. Come and learn because you also have to know from your side how it works. So it's going to be a really fun topic that we're going to have a lawyer and a broker on that's going to be talking to us about private lending, and and then afterwards we're going to get to network with everyone. So it's going to be a good time, and I hope you guys will enjoy. And let's see, I don't think he's on yet. He's double checking. Not yet. Yeah. And just to let you guys know, actually, Marcin will also be a guest on our next month's networking event. And he's going to be talking about raising capital. So even more fun. Hey, Marcin. Okay, I can see you're on. Okay, I can see the request. So just give me a minute if we can get it. Oh, there we go. Hey, I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Figuring out all this.
Oh, it froze. I don't know if it's me or Marcin. Hopefully, let's see where we're at here. I wonder who's frozen. Oh, okay, I think he froze. Let's try. Uh, okay, let's try again. Oh, okay, I think we lost him. I'm sure he'll come back. So yeah, today's oh, there you are. Okay. So I was just gonna give an intro. We're gonna be talking, it's gonna be behind the scenes, and you're gonna be sharing with us one of your projects and just going through the numbers and going through the problems. So I think this is always exciting because not only like yes, it's a lot of fun to build these projects out and also like make money, but it obviously problems will happen, but it comes with the game.
Yes.
And so let's start with just tell people a little bit about yourself first.
Sure. Yeah, I'm a real estate investor. I've been in. I started in private equity actually before I really got into real estate. I've been at it for 15 years now. So sourced a fair bit of capital, nine figures for a lot of different businesses, mostly real estate, also consumer services and finance businesses. Um, for me, real estate was always kind of, regardless of what else I was doing, I was always looking at deals, buying, apartments, apartment buildings, condos, whatever. For me, real estate was always just a no-brainer, something that you have, regardless of what else you're doing. And yeah, when COVID hit, at the time, me and my partner, we were looking at buying a few apartment buildings in Tennessee at the time, Memphis. And when COVID first hit, it was interesting. Back in March, my partner at the time, he literally felt like he was trying to smuggle himself into the U.S. under the essential worker exemption just to be able to go down there and buy buildings. We were fortunate enough to buy two buildings there since, 260 units so far. And now I've got a line on a few more buildings for a couple hundred more units. So I know you and I connected here a while ago, and I like what you're doing. So, if there's a way I can help and teach and maybe help people make less mistakes, then, here I am.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, same thing. Like I think it's great that we got to connect because the same way, like I love the way how you teach like how to OPM basically, like how to raise capital and stuff. And yeah, you have, and it's always great to learn from amazing people like you guys, like you that has done like so much. And it's just, great to learn from people and like that, even learn that everyone, problems will always happen to everyone. It's just learning to, pass through it, right?
Oh yeah. It's a daily occurrence, right? And I mean, you just focus on the right kind of problems, right? Don't I made a video a little while ago, I had a reel about content versus context. And a lot of people get caught up focused on problems, but they're focused on the wrong kind of problems. And because of that, they can never really scale beyond just buying a house or a duplex. And if that's all you want to do, then that's great. But I see so many people, my students, some of our investors, whatever it is, they get caught up in just the wrong problems, the wrong problems.
Yeah, and that's so true. Or they try to keep themselves busy with the wrong things just because they're scared to actually take that plunge to the actual task. Like for example, I have to go, let's say, find a house, and I got to go out there and just get it done. And then they're focusing on the website being nice and making sure like all these things that really don't matter, like the business cards are done or things that you're just gonna just get out there and get it done. Like make those mistakes. It's gonna be scary, but you're gonna learn from it.
Yeah, well, and I mean, making mistakes is, there is no way to not make a mistake. You're going to make them every day. The problem, the opportunity is that, you just fail. This is going to sound like such a cliche, but you fail small, fail fast, and just move on. Because I mean, ultimately, I make mistakes every day to this day. I mean, you make new ones every day, and the volume of the mistakes that you make, you just you don't want to, I'm not advocating you go out there and you go buy a 100-unit building if you've never done it before. Don't, go make a mistake on a duplex. It'll cost you less. A roof on a duplex is 10 grand. A roof on a 100-unit building is not 10 grand. So, but you're going to make those mistakes regardless, right? So I'll share this, actually just came in my mind. One of, talk about a bullet that we just dodged recently was we were doing due diligence a little while ago on a building. It was $1 million. They wanted, it was $1 million. It was 80 units. So price per door, amazing. We pulled the paper on the building, and we saw that it was bought 6 months earlier for cash. And that same buyer is the buyer that's selling it. So I'm thinking to myself, why the heck would you buy a building for $1 million and then 6 months later basically sell it for $1 million? Like, what happened? Because the market's done nothing but move in a different direction. So the seller's telling me a song and dance about they're selling because they changed their portfolio and they're doing things in a different way. I'm like, okay, sure, no reason to not believe that. We're going through our DD, and one of the things we did was we scoped, we snaked the sewage system. And when you snake the sewage system with residential, if you have an issue, it's a couple bucks, whatever it is. Commercial, if you have an issue, it is a ton of money. And sure enough, what happened is this guy bought it sight unseen, paid $1 million. He didn't have to do the things that you would normally have to do when you get a bank loan. He bought cash, and when he had people go in and prep the whole thing for reno and all that stuff, he realized that his sewage pipe was cracked to the city. And that pipe is hundreds of thousands of dollars because you got to dig up the entire system. You got to replace it to the city line. In this case, you got to barricade the traffic on one portion. You got to dig up roads. Like, it's a mess. So, you talk about an issue. That would have been probably $250,000, maybe $500,000 mistake. And on $1 million acquisition, that's a lot of money.
Oh my God, yes. That is a lot of money. That's a very scary problem. And how much was it, like, how much did it cost you guys to do the test?
That was $300-400, I think. I mean, we just,
Oh, cool.
you snake it, and then you have a camera on it. There's a few things. So the thing is, the bigger the deals you do, the smarter you get about how you allocate your time to determine things as you go through the process. So for example, when you tie up a house And this is why everybody should start, I think, with smaller deals. When you type a house, there's only a few things that are going to blow you up on the deal. You know, you're looking for the roof, you're looking for the foundation, you're looking for, you know, a few plumbing, you're looking for signs of mold, just cover up. Like, it's a lot easier to do that in a house. In an apartment building, 50 units, 100 units, you know, we walk all the units anyway, but at the end of the day, there's certain telltale signs that if you get wrong, when you peel that wall back and you're doing down to the studs renos, and you find out that you're actually dealing with black mold, not just in some moisture, like there's just, your expenses are not, you know, a couple bucks, it's a couple times 50 or 100 units, and that could be a lot.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, very true. Definitely, as you go bigger, the costs definitely become that much bigger.
Paving. So here's something else people don't think about, okay? Things like paving a driveway, a roof, making sure that the foundation, like these are all things that your tenants are going to expect there. Like having a dry roof is, or a dry unit is not optional. It's not a feature. Not a, hey, by the way, this one doesn't leak. Like that, but that, so those inputs, when you have to replace the roof or, you know, put new blacktop down on the driveway, these are things that people expect to be there if you want to charge market rents. And there's so many people that underestimate the amount of deferred maintenance on a property, and then they end up, and then the numbers look crazy, they look great, everything else, and then all of a sudden, you know, you go through the motions and, you know, you're 100 grand, 200 grand, 300 grand behind. Another property we were looking at, I remember there was a certain part of town that had a propensity to flood, and have a lot of, the water table was higher, and you know, you just, there's a certain area where you knew that there's a propensity of flooding and the sewage backup and all that stuff. So we tied up the property, and it was a bigger property. It was 160, 180 unit. We didn't end up buying it. It was 160 or 180, but we tied it up, and we were going through the motions, and the realtor's like, oh no, it's fine, and you know, the flooding is not an issue, blah blah blah, you know, units are renovated on this side of the building, da, 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 da. Okay, no problem. So it happened to rain the day after, so, and it rained and it rained and it rained. Next morning I get in the car, just like driving by the property, and literally there's a puddle right around the sewage system. It was like literally a foot of just water. I drove by that night, it was still there. I drove back the next morning, it was still there. So the water wasn't draining. It took 3 days to drain, right? So it's just, again, it's just knowing these things. And, you know, where do you learn this? You learn this on a house, when you have to make sure that you get water away from the property, when you have your you know, your storm ducts and you have everything set up, right? You learn about French drains, you learn about all these little things to help you. See, most people think fire is the worst thing. I think water is the worst thing. Because fire, you can see it, you can smell it. Water is a silent killer.
Yeah, it is. It's very true.
Right? Like, water is the thing that you don't even know you're dealing with it. And then when you peel back the wall, all of a sudden, right?
It is. Yeah, especially the type of walls that you have. Like if you have the paneling,
Mm-hmm.
that really hides the water a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Because it like, it's not like drywall. At least drywall, you'll start seeing it kind of bubble out and things like that. You'll see the stains coming. If it's like wood paneling, it can hide up for quite a while, and you could be getting like mold and who knows what building up behind the walls, or you know, until finally, I guess it's that bad that it will show.
Another mistake, I didn't make this mistakes, but I've seen my colleagues make it, is you over, actually there's a few, I have a list. What's the most obvious one? Oh, so this is something, so another thing is, and you guys might find this hard to believe, but sometimes the person who's selling you the deal might oversell it just a little bit. And, you know, we were looking at one property, and the guy was telling us, yeah, you can make it open concept with a kitchen, and, you know, you can get rid of the wall and just have like a breakfast area and open the whole space up, and you should be able to charge more rent for that. And he's right. He's absolutely right. But you know what he forgot? He forgot to mention, whether he knew this or didn't know this, that the electrical wiring is actually running from the ceiling down that wall. So the only way to do that feasibly is if there was no wiring in the wall, because otherwise, if you're going to cut that wall in half and move the electrical, anytime you move power, you need what? An electrician. You need permits. You need all this stuff. So it would have been just as simple cutting the wall in half, opening up and putting a breakfast bar down, is now a discussion with, an electrician. You got to cut power. You got to get permits. You got to, so it's no longer, hey, this is going to cost $300 and you can charge an extra $75 a month rent. It's, hey, this might be $3,000 per unit or $2,000 per unit. And by the way, it's only $50 more in rent. Right. So there's just so many of these little things. And to your point, it's easier if you make those mistakes on a smaller unit, or if you're working on bigger stuff, make sure you're trailing behind somebody who's, been to battle a few times.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely. I think especially when it comes to the multi-units, definitely, I don't think it's something that you should go in on your own. Because like you said, there's so much there that even like you said, between like houses to buildings is very completely different. Like exactly what you said, actually, with the roof specifically, we also learned that because of the Toronto house that we're renovating right now, we had to do the roofs and we added an extension, so that created part of it being a flat roof. And it was really funny. We actually struggled to get some our regular roofers couldn't do it because they're like, we don't have the licensing for commercial roofs, because now flat roofs are considered commercial. And they only had like the licensing for just like, I guess, like the regular roofs. And then so like the prices went up because that. So it's very interesting because even like in our small house, like it was like, I mean, it wasn't like a very big expense for us, but it was just very interesting even just to learn that you have to have a special licensing, a special license for flat roofs, and not all of them have it, because some of them just don't do that at all, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you're talking, I was thinking about, when you have how the salesman sold the house, how the engineer planned the house, and how the architect designed the house, and there's like 3 different types of houses. It's so true, because you have these visions in your mind about how to do something, but you layer on the the practicalities of, and to your point, yeah, even the roofing, because I mean that's different state by state, province by province, right? So all these little nuances, and that's kind of why I always tell people, if you're going to do something, that's why it's so important, in my opinion, to pick a niche. So if you're doing multifamily in Florida, awesome. If you're doing single family houses and flips in Atlanta, great. If you're lending on, starter homes in Oakville, Ontario, great. Just pick a niche, because there's so much to know within that niche, that if you're going to responsibly deploy capital, whether it's your money or someone else's money that's investing with you, you need to have that vertical buttoned up. Like it needs, you got to spend a lot of time, ask a lot of questions, and just understand the little nuances, right? I mean, even so in some states, I don't know about the provinces, but in some states, there's a difference between when you have to pull a building permit versus when you can just do work. Whether you take the drywall and you go to the studs, or whether, like, there's different definitions for things. And knowing all those little nuances it's the difference between a project taking 3 months and 3 years to finish. Like it's.
Yeah, that's also very true. Yeah, exactly. Permits can. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Sorry, I was going to say, I had a friend of mine in Toronto who's just building a custom home, and I don't know how he pulled this off. Maybe we should get him on this thing. But he was building a home. He tore down the whole house, left one wall, like a long brick wall, and was able to get basically an extension on his existing debt facility to build the whole thing on the existing property, and not have to pull a permit or reappraise the property for property taxes.
He didn't have to. He had to get a permit. He probably didn't have to get like a new building permit, because you still have to get permits for like rent. You didn't get any kind of permits?
He got like renos stuff, but he didn't he didn't have to get
like a new build one.
Correct. And he did, and the house is literally three times the size. He kept one wall. It's on
Yeah.
a piece of land, and his property taxes aren't getting reassessed because that house now, if it traded, it would be, you know, several $1 million as opposed to what it was before.
Hmm.
So nuances everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. And like you said, because once you pick your niche and you're going to like work in a certain area, it's true. Every city even has their own rules and it's just there is so much to learn.
Hmm.
Um, that is just like it's good to even probably even by city. Just know the city well enough.
Years ago, 10 10 plus years ago, I was looking at doing, looking at buying an apartment building in Winnipeg. This is when so I'm a cash flow guy. I know there's a lot of guys that do, you know, other types of strategies in Canada and whatever it is. I'm a strict cash flow, money in, money out, refund. I like that stuff. And there was a time in Canada, last market I was in was Winnipeg, and we were doing really, really well with these, you know, burrs, the big burrs, so to speak. And I was about to pull the trigger on this building. I figured it was 20 or 30 doors, something like that. At the time, it was a big deal for me. But I stopped myself cold in my tracks when I found out that if I bought this building, the uh, the way the building was grandfathered in terms of the fire procedures, I'm going to butcher this right now, but basically I would have to overhaul a good portion of how this building was built. And the equivalent of I had to build like staircases outside of the units going like these big iron, like just insane. And
Hmm.
I didn't go talk to the city, if I didn't, and they just casually mentioned it like it was no big deal. They're like, oh yeah, you know, so you know when you close on this, here's some options for some trades for the stairs. And I'm like, sorry, I'm trying to keep my face straight, right? I'm 23 or whatever at the time. I'm like, sorry, stairs. Uh, I'm thinking that the stairwell. She goes, yeah, you know, section da 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 da. When you're gonna have to replace the stairwells out, because to them they thought I knew.
Yeah.
They're like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the stairs to outside of a house is quite expensive.
It was obviously we didn't do that deal, but you know, it's just that's what goes to show you like multifamily in Toronto, Ontario is different than Rochester, New York, than different in, you know, Daytona, Florida, than wherever it is. Like you gotta like there's state, there's municipal, there's all these different components. So to me, I always tell people like you gotta have your niche. Like the asset class isn't enough because within that asset class, there's plenty of ways for you to get blown up still if you don't have it figured out.
Yeah, 100%. So what kind of problems have you ever encountered? Like what was the biggest problem you've ever encountered, either related to like raising capital or like getting the house itself or closing on it, or I mean the building because you're more into the buildings.
Well, um, I'll share a problem that's probably a big problem to a lot of people. That used to be a problem for me that really isn't one anymore. I mean, I can share stories about plumbing and surprise trades issues and things like that, but I'm sure there's plenty of people that can speak to that. I'm sure we've all had it, but I think a major problem that I know a lot of people typically have is they have a deal, and especially when the market is so competitive, that your ability to close on that transaction, the bigger it gets, the harder it is, not just for financing, but just getting access to the capital. So we bought a 178 unit building here in the spring, and we paid 4 million for, not quite 4 million USD, but it was all cash, no financing. And, you know, I didn't have 4 million in my pocket. I mean, we all kicked in, but ultimately I didn't have 4 million sitting, and we had 30 days to close. So we had, pardon me, had 45 days to close. We went hard after 30. Our deposit, it was 50 or 100,000. We went hard after 30, and then we had 45 days in total to close. So how do you marshal those resources together to close that quickly? Is
Hmm.
the biggest challenge most people have. And the answer is the structure that you're going down with, you already have before you have a deal. That's number one. Because if you don't have your poop in a group here, whether you're buying again 10 unit in St. Catharines or 100 unit in, I don't know, Nashville, if you don't have your structure in place, you can't go and marshal the resources with your investors because you can't set expectations. You can't set, there's so many variables that you can't speak to. And if you've been doing this for a while, eventually you can get to a point where you can actually make a broad vision to an investor about what you're doing and where, and set the right terms for them before you actually do it, so that when that deal does come up, you already have 8 or 18 people or whatever amount of people that are qualified, capable, and willing and informed on what you're doing. So that is, for me, that's probably the biggest obstacle that's fairly seamless for us now. But yeah, for most people, I think, they wait till they have a deal to go get money, but then two things happen. They spin their wheels on trying to get the money because it's not as quick as you think it is. And then they potentially burn that relationship with the seller or the broker because they can't perform.
Mm-hmm. So by structure, then you meant structure as in people wise, like just having the people, or I was thinking structuring as in like your JV deal, how it would work or whatever.
Well, so it depends on where you're at in your development. I mean, if you don't have, if you've never done a deal with another investor before, then you're gonna really trip over yourself, because everything is new. Like, everything is new. So, if you're a first-time investor and you're doing a JV with somebody, my recommendation is to focus on a deal with a friendly seller, so they have the patience to let you, mosey through the transaction. But assuming that you understand the flow of the transaction with all parties, what I'm trying to say is, you need to have the conversations with people before that deal shows up, so that when you find something that fits those parameters, they're actually going to be able to come in with you on that deal. And because most of your investors, I mean, you've been investing for a while, you get it. You don't need to see every property yourself. You have a framework that it fits into, and if it fits, then 80% of your mental work is done, and then you're just verifying things, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so as long as you have your investors 80% there with you conceptually, and that's why I talk about an investment thesis. So actually, here's an answer to your question. The hardest thing I've ever had to do is tighten up my investment thesis in a way where people can understand it enough, and I have room within that thesis for people to move forward.
Oh yeah, like the money investors to move forward.
Well, so for example, my investment thesis is, so the hardest thing, so an investment thesis, for those of the people that don't know, is like, you hear about companies like Blackstone or KKR, these private equity firms, they raise hundreds of millions of dollars and then they go out and buy things after. Well, for them to get that money to go buy things, they had an investment thesis. So the people that are investing are looking at the thesis and the people behind it and saying, yeah, I like this idea and I think these guys can pull it off. So sure, we'll commit to X dollars. And that's how they get the financial commitment. So the hardest thing for me was to be able to do what I'm doing in a concise way. So for example, my investment thesis is I buy mismanaged buildings for less than half of what they cost to build in markets with friendly landlord laws. And I look for stable or growing employment base. So those are the 4 pillars of my investment thesis. So that's taken me everywhere from Winnipeg to Tennessee, Memphis to now Florida. My thesis has a very specific
criteria.
Yeah, and that's why when I call any of my investors, they know what I'm doing. So they know that if I go to a new market, it's because that's what we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. That's a great thing. That's really great for just, and it's basically your thesis is what your niche is what you're saying. It just says like what it is that you're doing, so that they have exactly enough confidence in you to actually, go forward with, oh yeah, take my money because I know exactly what you're doing.
There's a lot of paperwork and
Yeah, no, I know.
like a T-shirt with the Futurama guy, shut up and take my money, right? No, they But
if it were only that easy, right?
well, I mean, look, they understand. And I mean, the thing too is that eventually, if you've done your job right, eventually you can't take any more money from any new people because you're out of deals. Like, once you're at this for a couple of years, you perform, you exit, you do it again, you end up having a different type of relationship where, things are more about being selective than they are about just volume, right? So that's a big part of it. And I mean, I remember when I first started, I would want to do everything all the time and look at every deal and run around. And now, I'm 36 and, I'm still a baby in the real estate world compared to a lot of my peers. But even me now, I'm just like, you know what? You can do less. Abraham Lincoln, what does he say? He goes, if you guys 4 hours to cut down a tree, he spends the first 3 hours sharpening the axe, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's very true. And it's also, yeah, because you're very more just analytical about it and you're just making sure this is the right deal. And like you said at the beginning, it's just trying to get everything because it's like you want to, for some reason, have your hands in everything. And afterwards, you start realizing like the niche is so important. And also, I think as you become more known, it's easier actually the niche because they know you for that specific thing. And, if that's what they want, they come to you anyways.
You
And
can't,
then like you said, easier for them to know.
yeah. Well, and you can't scale something you can't replicate. And if everything that you do is tied to what's in your head, then you're never going to scale. You're always going to be like I have many people that work for us in various capacities that are experts, and they're engineers, lawyers, accountants, specialty accountants, cross-border people, whatever, and they get paid very, very well. But if they don't show up to work, there's no result. And I've always tried to avoid building something that's so technically complex that you can't bring people on to replicate it and be able to help you scale it, because ultimately then you don't want to have to go and create a real estate business that needs you to run. Like that's the other ultimate selfish thing for me. If you ask Maria, I'm incredibly lazy if I can get away with it.
Actually, speaking of that, how was your transition? Let's say, what kind of problems did you encounter actually transitioning um, into this, into deciding that you're going to go into multi-units and, setting up your business?
Uh, yeah, that's actually a really good question. So the biggest challenge I had with multi, going from single or small multi to big multi, was relying on systems and processes rather than, oh, I'll figure it out or I'll fix it. That was the biggest thing, because the everyone's tendency is to immediately just put the cape on and Superman or Superwoman, I'll figure it out, don't worry, we'll sort it out. You can get away with that when you have a few properties, kind of scattered throughout your area. But as you start to have a much broader approach, you need to get yourself personally disconnected from doing. It doesn't mean you're not capable of doing the work, but you want to disconnect yourself from the day to day. So, for example, what I like to do is when we have a new property manager come on, or whatever it is, I like to pretend that I don't know anything as the owner. I literally will happily show up on site, kind of happy-go-lucky, and be like, "Hey, so how do we fill out the leases here? Like what? Like like." And I'm happy to play the brain dead owner. I want them thinking that I don't know anything, because I want them to show me how they do it. Are you using the software? Are you doing paper versions? How are you tracking things? Like, I literally have them walk me through it. And to me, that approach is such a counterintuitive thing to, because immediately what do you want to do? You want to go in there and say, okay, listen, so here's how this works. Da, 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 da. I'd rather have them show me how they're actually doing it, because then I'll appreciate it from their perspective. And then I'll ask questions like, hey, so why do we do it that way? Do we have like a software or something? And they'll be like, yeah, but it's stupid. It's hard to use. But like, people aren't trying to do a bad job, but they're not doing it the way you think they should do it for a reason. So why not find out why? So the biggest thing for me, I think, was getting over the personal need to dictate and direct, and to actually kind of step back and more broadly understand why they're doing things the way they're doing them, rather than saying, hey, per section 3 of this manual, you should be doing this, blah, blah, blah. Like, they know, but why aren't they doing it?
Yeah.
Maybe they don't have their password. Maybe this, maybe the.
Hmm. No, I completely agree. Actually, I'm kind of in the same mindset where I like them to tell me how they do things because you start just seeing if you're compatible in that way, right? Because I feel like if you dictate a lot,
Mhm.
um, that kind of stops you from seeing them because you're just telling them like this is how everything goes, but you don't actually get to know them as a person. And it's better to be like, does the way you do things, work for me? Like, is this something that we can make happen, or it's just like, no, it's not gonna happen because we just like, I don't know, maybe for like I like things super organized and you're not so super organized and it's like maybe it's not gonna work out or something. But like you just get to learn about a lot about them, I feel like when you're going through that approach too, of just seeing like what is that they do. And like you said, you even just because also it's releasing that control too, because I mean you can't always do everything your way. And why? Who cares? As long as it gets done and it's done, the way you like, as long as it's done well, doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes they have better ideas,
Mhm.
and when they have better ideas, you implement them. I don't have any personal attachment to any of the systems and processes that you have, but you do need systems and processes. It's kind of a boring, unglamorous thing to say, but ultimately you have to have it. And sometimes employees will come up with better processes and systems. Sometimes they think they know better and they're actually creating more busy work for someone else, but their job is simpler, but someone else is more complicated because they're doing things a certain way. And that's an opportunity for retraining. And actually, so if you have, for example, if you have a assistant property manager and you have a property manager that's managing that person, the assistant property manager will tell you how they do things, and then I'll go back, rather, if I'm not their direct report, I'll go to whoever manages them and say, hey, so and so told me that she does it or he does it this way. Where did that come from? Oh, well, no. And then you find out because sometimes they're not the problem, sometimes, but it's you spend a lot of time diagnosing stuff as opposed to correct. Because if you get in there and you directly roll up your sleeves and you fix everything all the time, that phone, I don't even know where my cell phone, actually, I'm using it right now. shows you how familiar I am with this Instagram thing. I was going to say that phone is going to keep ringing, right? And I don't like when people call me for the same thing more than once because it shows me a chink in the armor. There's a problem. There's a system that doesn't exist. There's this procedure that's not there. Right.
Yeah, or like that they haven't been trained properly. Kind of the same way. If you're asking the same question, clearly I haven't taught you it properly or the best way or whatever, or you're not understanding what's needed. I've always felt it also in that sense. Like if the same question comes again, I was like, I clearly my communication wasn't good enough because there's a breakdown.
Yeah. Another thing I think that's really important when you scale in multifamily or even if you have 100 houses or 500 houses, because I know people that don't like multifamily, but they have hundreds of houses, like houses. Don't misunderstand. They're still running a business and they have a culture, they have a team, they have an environment. I think the importance of if you're going to build this, you have to understand that first of all, you're running a business, like an actual business. Your product might be housing, but it's still a business. And the part-time landlord, the guy that has a duplex or maybe a condo downtown, if that's all they have, then okay, fine. It's kind of a side thing, a side hustle, so to speak. But if your goal is to buy dozens or hundreds of properties, then that management component is its own thing that has to exist for the purposes of maintaining that asset. If you look at any of the major real estate investment trusts or biggest landlords in the country, they all have what? Separate businesses that are operating property management companies. And they all manage their own assets at a certain size because that is what protects the value in the asset. And they have a culture, they have a scope, they have a focus, they have a mission, they have goals, they have it's a business. Their product happens to be housing, but it exists for the purposes of supporting those assets. So you need that.
Yeah, completely agree. I feel like this is more behind the scenes. Now my next question is gonna be about your company. I'm like, this seems to be more about behind the scenes on how your corporations are set up. Just because you're making me curious now.
Hmm.
I'm curious on when you started getting, again, like transitioning and starting to build out your business from where you were at the beginning to where you now. How has your role changed?
That is a good question. Um, less doing and more vision, directing, inspiring, and getting people to do the things they need to get done is more of the role. Like I'm still very hands-on, maybe too hands-on if you ask some of the people that work with me, but you like so for example, we had a portfolio that we built and we sold in the early 2010s in Arizona. So we did the same thing. We put a limited partnership together. We raised I think it was 12 or 13 million in equity, paired that up with debt, got a good sized portfolio going, sold out of that, did it again, basically doing it again now. So, the portfolio itself, it gets traded, but the core people that you have, you typically bring along. And I think I'm done doing the buying and selling thing. And now it's more of a buying, keeping, and just holding forever because it's so much work to just keep doing it over and over again. Like, yeah, you get a nice return and a good exit for people, but every time you have to start, you got to restart. Now you restart faster because you know the game, but what I'm looking forward to now is just like surrounding myself with really good people, whether it's, direct in the operating entities or, good lawyers, accountants. I guess the answer is I'm more focused on maintaining the vision and building the relationships today than I think I've ever been before.
Mhm. And the relationships in which areas? Like you're like, are you talking about your corporation, like your workers, like that, or you mean relationships with your partners, everyone?
Look, at the end of the day, I've come to realize that whether it's your investors, your deal flow side on the acquisition side, the anybody day to day working in the business, if they don't like, trust, and respect management, you're not going to get the dollars, you're not going to get the best out of your people, and you're not going to get the deals because nobody wants to work with an ass. Like it's just so at the end of the day, if you're creating that, my job is to remove obstructions for everybody else. I create obstructions sometimes, but remove them. And that's kind of the goal. That's the goal of a CEO. I think being an operating CEO for me, I love it. I love that. I love doing that. It's hard. There's easier ways to make money, but it's fun. And I think for the next 10, 15 years, it'll probably still be fun for me. So.
Mhm. Yeah, because it's like seeing your baby grow. I feel like you're just like, what happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? Like, how can I make it grow bigger or whatever?
Oh, bigger without a purpose is kind of mindless, kind of mindless growth for growth's sake. I don't know if I believe in that, but if you can grow in a way that it's focused and clear and you're adding value and you're creating a culture within the people. If you're making a place that's fun for people to be part of, then that to me is that'll weather the storm because you're going to have situations where you're going to have deals or opportunistic things happen, come and go, and whatnot. But at the end of the day, if you have an environment for people where they actually enjoy what they're, especially nowadays with all the remote working, people working from home. I was getting articles from friends about how you don't have to. People are quitting because they don't want to. They're quitting their jobs, like on record now.
Yeah.
Especially with this whole shift, and who knows where that'll go. But at the end of the day, people want to work somewhere where they feel like they're making an impact. And if you feel like yes, you're creating returns, you're creating profit, but if you can create an environment where people are actually really excited about going to work, I mean, I want to be there.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, COVID has been very interesting, because the first half of the year was sorry, the first last year when it first started, everyone's scared about losing their jobs and everything. And it's true. This year now it's like everyone's like quitting their jobs and trying to find something that they want because they're really realizing maybe they're unhappy in what they do, or like that, like exactly you said, like even having the team around you, if you don't have that support or that motivation, or you don't have that, like you're actually impacting the company in some way, it does. It really affects you because you just feel like, what's the point of me being here? And it is. I've been noticing that a lot too. A lot of people are making a lot of moves this year.
Hmm. Yeah, it's true. I mean, people are they're they have the luxury. Houses have gone up in value. They have equity in their homes. Maybe they've already moved out of the city and they can't go back to work because I have friends that have moved 2 hours outside of downtown, Toronto as an example. That they're not going back to work.
Yeah, completely. That's so true. So with that, so what are the kind of problems in since I feel like I've totally changed this now just because I like hearing about your business model. But like what kind of um like problems did you encounter in your transition from either like a small business or just getting into a business? Like what was it like? Did you have any significant um I don't know, impactful things that happened to you while you were.
Well, something else I'll share with you is as we're talking, I think the other major thing that I at least went through, and I'm sure most entrepreneurs go through, is really respecting the accounting of a business, the accounting side of the business, like really appreciating the numbers. Now, I mean, obviously, common sense. You make X on a widget, you pay Y in expenses, you've got your revenues. Most entrepreneurs inherently understand the need to make money and how much they're kind of making, but when you get to larger deals, and this is true whether you're, selling toothpicks or uh, providing housing, multifamily housing, as the numbers get bigger, the respect for your accounting department has to be up here. It can't be one of those things that you're just like, whatever, or I'll figure it out after, or it'll work itself out. The bigger it gets, the more important it is. Number one, obviously your bankers. Number two, your investors. Number three, measure what you treasure. If you don't know what your KPIs are, if you don't understand, like if you don't have an understanding of your expenses relative to percentages of other components of the income statement or the balance sheet, then you're gonna end up having, or the liabilities of the balance sheet, you're gonna end up having a really tough time, like a really tough time, because what worked for you. So I'll give you an example. When we were in Winnipeg, one of the things we were doing, we had a couple dozen smaller properties, and at some point, I think ego kicked in, and I was like, you know what, we're going to start our own property management company. Oh, yeah, that was not a good idea. And then you know what, we're pulling so many mortgages, we're going to start our own mortgage brokerage. Not a good idea. So that was because I didn't respect the numbers that much. This was 12 or 13 years, whatever it was. It was, again, I'm 36 now, it's early 20s, right? I'm like, you know what? Yeah, like we can, because ego, right? I wasn't driving the business with the math. Like the vision for those things wasn't wrong per se, but the context in which I was trying to operate from was completely out of left field. Because if I'd actually sat down and said to myself, okay, so I'm managing, a couple dozen properties, I'm going to bring that revenue in house, sure, or I'm not going to take the expense, so I'll technically increase revenues. But then it's like, okay, what do you know about running a property management company? Well, at the time, not much. So it's like, okay, you're spending this on these people, you need these licenses, these trainings, so all of a sudden, I'm now distracted trying to build a property management company to increase the revenue of that thing just to offset the thing I was trying to pay for in the first place. You understand? Like it was.
Yes, yes. I feel like that's very, very normal with entrepreneur mindsets. And like you said, when you're just trying to like either you're trying to save money or you think you're going to make money, and then you're like, I'm going to create all these different businesses because I'm doing it all, so I'm definitely going to be saving money or making myself more money, whichever direction you want to look at it. I think that's also a very normal thing that happens to a lot of us, where we think we can do everything, thinking that it's just going to be better for us, and it's just like, just share the pie.
Yeah, I mean, I would have been better off if I just kept my property management at the time as a variable expense because I didn't have enough density to offset the fixed costs that I was adding. But of course, in 2010 or whatever it was, I didn't fully understand how to read a balance sheet or an income statement or a statement of cash flows. And so consciously, I was like, yeah, I think it'll work. Kind of like, and then, you start lying to yourself. You start telling stories, right? You start telling yourself stories like, oh, what we'll do is we'll just, we'll bring on a few more properties and then it'll cover itself. But then in your mind, you don't actually count the fact that the amount of properties you need to bring on, your overhead is then going to increase even more. And then you're constantly chasing this tail that you can't catch eventually, right? So it's,
Yeah.
that was probably, that caused some gray hair. Doing nowadays. So yeah, I'm a big believer in running your own property management, but hundreds of doors out of the gate, as opposed to, here's 8, here's 2. And you know what, if I drive by, the property once a month and I collect the checks, I can save another $100. Like, look, you might want to do that regardless because $100 extra is $100. Got it. Takes you 5 minutes. But what happens when you're gone for 3 months? You always build in, most real estate investors, and I was guilty of this, they don't account for their time in the context of what it would cost to have a third party do it, whether it was an acquisition, a disposition, a financing. If you look at any of the fee structures that are involved in institutional investments, they're not all just greedy pigs. Like, they're just trying to pay operating expenses.
No, completely. I think like the number one thing that entrepreneurs do is they become the bottleneck
Mhm.
to their business, because exactly what you said, right? You're like, oh, I just want to save some money here, so I'm gonna do this. And then if you want to leave for a month vacation, or if you get sick for a few weeks or something, then it's like almost your company is stopping, and that could be really bad for your business.
Yep. Yeah, I remember the first rental property I bought actually in Oakville, where I think you're at, right? It was in Oakville, and I budgeted. I was so proud of myself. I budgeted $50 a month for grass cutting, and every time, and it was my own property, and every time I went and I cut the grass, I got the $50. But whenever I didn't feel like it, it was still okay because I knew I was going to spend $50 for grass cutting. So,
Mhm.
I was 21 at the time, so $50. I'm like, hey, I can go cut the grass. $50. That's pizza and beer for the weekend, right? So it was, but at least I knew that I had to. Now I forgot to account for other expenses. There's all kinds of lessons there, but I was trying to habit of at least accounting for my time.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's also, I think, very true, because a lot of people won't, for example, I get property management, right? They say like, oh, I'm gonna charge, let's say $100 a month, or let's say $50 a month for property management. And then like that, like maybe a few months you can't because you're busy. Maybe your business is growing and your time is going somewhere else. And then that $50 doesn't actually cover because you're thinking only of yourself and you're not thinking like what is an actual property company charge. And then they're like, oh, now it's, let's say 120. Like, I hope I have enough cash flow that it's not going out of pocket now. So it's very true. I feel like for some reason we like to like cheat ourselves out of money too. Like thinking that, oh, because it's me, I'm just gonna do it for like $20. It's okay. But like, no, think of the long future, like long term. You want to make sure this is actually gonna work forever.
I do that to myself when I go through the McDonald's drive-through. You know how it tells you the calories? I tell myself stories like, okay, I'm only going to eat half of it. So the calories
Half. Yeah.
end up, right? So it's, but yeah, as long as you're cognizant of it, right? That's important. So
Yeah. Or work. Yeah, exactly. Like working towards it. Because I mean, if you've already done it now, at least you're feeling the pain and you're like, okay, let's work forward and try to remedy the situation a bit.
Yeah.
So last question for you, for the audience. Let's say, since again, I kind of changed it. I felt like we did a rewind on your business. Uh, but for the audience, for people who are wanting to, let's say, either scale up their business or start their business, what tips, what one or two tips would you give them?
Well, treat it like a business, I think, is the most obvious tip. And always think about it in the context of, I mean, we're just kind of talking about it. You got to think about it in the context of eventually you're not going to be cutting the grass. You're not going to be, going through the motions to bring on the tenants, to do these things. You always have to be thinking about how do you work on the business, your real estate business, as quickly and as soon as you can, even if all you have is a triplex, even if all you have is 2 condos. Always treat it like a business, like literally do the QuickBooks thing, learn about the different components that tie into the business. The next thing I'd highly encourage somebody to do is learn the skill set of how to raise money, because eventually you will hit a wall, whether it's at 3 doors, 30 doors, if you're fortunate enough, 300 doors, whatever your capacity is, you will hit a wall. Everybody does. And learning how to raise capital is incredibly important. There's rules, there's regulations, depends where you are in the world. There's all kinds of different ways to do it. But at least getting exposure to that, whether you need money or not today, is important, because that skill set isn't like, oh, you just turn it on and okay, I need money. Like who has money? Like, it doesn't work that way. You have to learn the skill set. And hint, that skill set is highly reliant on you treating it like a business, the real estate side, because anybody with real money is going to expect you to have a real business that they can invest in. Yeah, they're buying into a building, but if there's somebody who understands business, and the people that are going to write the biggest checks typically do, they will want to see that you understand that it's a business and it's not just about the property.
Great point. Great way to end it off. Very true. 100% completely agree. Thank you so much. I think everyone really enjoyed this. And I wanted to quickly end it off with also just talking about our networking event that in September, Marcin's going to be on, and he's going to be talking about raising capital. And everyone's going to be networking and enjoying. So if you guys like what you saw here and just want to hear, he's going to be our expert speaker for September's networking event.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me, and appreciate you obviously coming out to our last mastermind. If anybody wants to learn more about what I do, marcindrozdz.com is my website. There's tons of information and free stuff there, so check it out. And obviously, Diana, thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for coming on. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see everyone at the next episode. Bye, everyone.